What if you could turn your passion for helping others into a career that changes lives, starting with your own? Join Empower's Certified Professional Empower Coach Academy, accredited by the ICF and powered by Oregon State University. Our next cohort begins February 28th. Visit yesempower.com to reserve your spot today.
Welcome to Rewired. I'm your host, Tiffany Grimes with Empower Coaching and Training. Have you ever walked away from a moment, let's say a conversation, an email, a boundary decision, and thought, why did I react like that? Or that didn't feel aligned with who I want to be? I just had this last week, a particular incident where I had such a big reaction to something that I didn't think I was going to have that reaction to. And I found myself in the middle of that reaction feeling like, oh, that is not what I wanted to do. That's not how I wanted to be. So if you are hearing this and can associate with it, what I want you to know, and also what I'm reminding myself, is that there is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me that I had that big reaction. Now, there's lots of ground to explore. There's lots of ground to see what I can do differently. But what I did in that moment when I had that big brain reaction is do exactly what my brain is designed to do. It's meant to make meaning quickly and move me into action. And it's a brain that is designed for survival, to identify threats. And so quickly and literally without thinking, there was a situation. I made meaning of that based on my experience in life, my stories, trauma, training, all of these things. And then I moved to a survival-based action. So we're just doing what we're designed to do. Now, can we do it better? Yes. Can we work through and create better responses and in fact move from reaction to response? Yes. So today what we're going to do is learn a tool that slows down the process from stimuli to response. This episode is about TEB, or thought, emotion, behavior. And it's a simple brain-based map that helps us as human beings understand how our reactions form, and more importantly, where choice actually lives. Before we get to all of the goodness around TEB cycle, we do have a listener question this week. So thank you. If you are interested in submitting a question, please do so. We love them. Either I will answer them as a certified professional coach, or so far what I've done is lean into the amazing colleagues I have within Empower Coaching and Training who are certified professional coaches, and they have leaned in to answer the questions. So if you have a question, send it to us, Tiffany at yesempower.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn over there and send the question through LinkedIn. They can be anonymous, which is the case for this particular question. To answer this question, I pulled in Satya Beneventi. You all met Satya in episode 1 of Rewired. She was my very first guest. She was also the very first person I hired after working solo for several years at Empower. She's an incredible person, an incredibly talented and gifted coach, and has in the last few years turned her expertise and got extensive training in coaching couples. So she really moved from just coaching parents into couplehood and all that comes with that. And so I leaned into her for this question. The question is, my partner and I repeat the same argument over and over. What neuroscience-based strategies can help us break that cycle and communicate differently? Satya, Help us out here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Empower Coach Satya. So we had a fantastic question come through, and it's one of the more common questions that we receive in couples coaching. So I wanted to share a little response here. So the question is, why do my partner and I continue to argue about the same thing over and over? So from a neuroscience perspective, you're not actually arguing about the dishes or the schedule anymore. You're caught in what is called a neural loop. Okay. So when conflict arises and starts, it is a threat to your connection. And what kicks in is the flight, fight, freeze, or fawn response, and that is from your amygdala, which physically shuts down your prefrontal cortex. And if you've listened to any of the other Empower Coaching and Training podcasts, you'll know this information by now. So let me give you an example. So we have a couple, and let's talk about the one partner, Mark. And Mark's family of origin, he grew up where conflict meant abandonment. So if you argued, people left. So now, when Mark's partner, Sarah, raises her voice in frustration, it triggers Mark's amygdala and he hits the flight response. So, what it is for Mark is that he wants to go away, he wants to shut down, and he wants to go silent to protect himself. Very common. So, for Sarah, however, and her family of origin, silence meant you were being ignored. So, for her brain, Mark going silent is a danger signal, and then her amygdala response is to fight. So, she pursues Mark and she gets louder so she can be heard. Now he withdraws further, she pursues harder. This is the loop, okay? So the strategy that you can implement is the name it to tame it strategy. So number one, basically you identify the trigger, the subconscious pattern, what is lurking underneath the surface for you, okay? So to break the loop, instead of litigating the past and recreating the argument over and over, go deeper. In an uncharged moment, maybe get your journal out, do the work, and ask yourself, what is underneath this trigger for me? Maybe you need to be seen. Maybe you need to be heard. Maybe you want to be understood a little bit more deeply. Okay? So please remember, you aren't fighting with your partner. You're actually both fighting a biological loop. So change the biology and you change the relationship. Do that inner work. It is golden. So look, potentially see this as a gift. The same argument over and over is truly an opportunity to learn more about who you are inside of your relationship. All right, so that's it. Thanks so much for the question.
Such great information and feedback and support. Satya, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you. I'm being reminded of we need to do a new episode. We're moving into the episode 20 somethings and I've learned a lot. So I want to get you back on here and have another really great conversation around couples coaching. It's just such a powerful tool for partnership. So again, thank you, Satya. Now let's get back to our topic today, which is the TEB cycle. Let's start with what TEB is. It actually comes from cognitive behavioral therapy and has moved into the coaching world absolutely and is a foundational part of cognitive behavioral coaching and brain-based coaching. And it has one of the strongest research bases in psychology and in coaching. But today we're not going to talk about it from that therapy lens. We're not going to talk about cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to talk about it through the lens of coaching. And we're talking about it specifically through the lens of self-awareness, which is the basis of all good coaching. So here's the basic idea. Something happens. So we're going to call that a trigger. Some people call it an event or a circumstance. So something happens. Your brain tells you a story about it. Your body responds emotionally, and then you act or really react, right? And so that, if we summarize that, we would summarize that as a thought, which drives emotion, which drives behaviors. We can go on to explore this. And in the exercise we do later, we really think about how those behaviors then lead to outcomes. And if we want to change outcomes, then we probably have to change behaviors, which means we need to be aware of our emotions, which means we need to be aware of our thoughts. And all of these things are things that we have control over once we bring self-awareness to those. So the trigger is something that is outside of our control. It's something that happens, an event. And then everything that follows that is something that we can bring self-awareness to and play with and manipulate in positive ways that can lead to outcomes that align with who we are and who we want to be. And here's the key insight that changed everything for me when I started using this. It's been probably 6 to 7 years ago now. Most of this happens before we realize it's happening. So those thoughts, emotion, behavior, reactions are literally what we would call mindless TEB. It's a mindless TEB. We are always in a TEB cycle. We can either be mindful of them most of the time based on our brain's desire to be efficient and to not always be thinking and planning and choosing, but instead want to work on habit and patterns. It's happening without us realizing it. Our brain is a meaning-making machine. It's fast, it's protective, it's efficient, and it's biased by your past experiences. So when something happens, your brain fills in the gaps instantly. It's going to tell me a story instantly, often without me even asking for the story. It's not asking for my permission. Hey, I have a little insight on this. Can I share? It's like, boom, here's what's up. And making it feel as though there is no choice, making it feel as though it is fact, that my thoughts are facts when they are actually just thoughts. All right, I'm going to bring the brain into this, so let's talk about it for a moment. When something feels uncertain, maybe it feels threatening, certainly emotionally charged, your nervous system wants relief. We talked about this a couple of episodes when we talked about surfing the urge. Our nervous system wants relief, and it wants it now because it's also based in survival. That's not a weakness. That's just biology. That's just who we are as human beings. So research on cognitive behavioral therapy shows that when people learn to notice the connection between their thoughts, their emotions, and their behaviors, they actually strengthen parts of the brain associated with reflection and regulation, particularly the prefrontal cortex. I don't think I have had one episode where we haven't talked about Dr. PFC, while reducing overactivation in the amygdala, which is the other starring role of the Rewired podcast. So we are bringing the awareness and the ability to reflect and regulate through the prefrontal cortex when we're practicing this. And we are reducing that threat center, the threat detection center, that amygdala. We're reducing the activation in that area, meaning really we're bringing the stimuli rather than having it shoot down into our lower brain or survival brain. We're bringing that stimuli and we're bringing it into the Dr. PFC.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Ready to make a real difference? Become a certified professional coach with Empower Coaching and Training. Our next CPEC cohort, accredited by the International Coaching Federation and offered in partnership with Oregon State University, starts February 28th. Spots are limited. Learn more at yesempower.com.
So, translation. just to kind of simplify that, awareness literally helps your brain pause. Literally helps our brain pause. It literally helps that amygdala hold the stimuli just a moment longer to say, is this actually the story? That story that we're making up in here, is this actually true, or what else might be true? But unless we can bring awareness to the relationship between thought, emotion, behavior, it's just happening. And that pause isn't going to happen. And that pause is everything. This is where our choices lie. This is where we can realign with our values. That pause is where we can get curious with our options and our thought processes and our assumptions and rewrite the stories. That pause is where we can say, that statement, she doesn't like me, that's a thought. That's not a fact. So what else might be true here, right? That pause is everything. And awareness helps our brain pause. So what TEB is doing is bringing us a tool to help us create more pause. So let's bring this home. Let's work through an example. I'm going to walk alongside you on this. So I'm going to be using an example, and I'm going to be inviting you to use an example. There is a PDF that we will attach to the show notes on this that you can use to walk you through this. So I'm going to start with what we would call, what I mentioned earlier, a mindless TEB. Okay, so we're going to think about a recent moment that, it's not super big, it's not super traumatic, but it was triggering for you. So we're going to start in some shallower waters. Okay. So here is an example of mine. So we at Empower Coaching and Training, we, coach folks all the time. We do a ton of professional development. And then we also have a coach training academy, which you're aware of, but we have this whole arm branch, really half of our body of who we are as a business is we serve state agencies. So Department of Human Services and Vocational Rehabilitation and Commission for the Blind and employment departments and K through 12s and all these really cool places where we're helping bring coaching and essential employability skills into the lives of folks accessing these services. So anyone right now who is accessing state funding or is, part of a contract for federal funds is a little like, wonder what's going to happen. Wonder what the next 3 years is going to look like, because there has been, a lot of changes and things going on in federal and state funding, obviously. So put that in perspective. So I got an email the other day from a funder a partner that we contract with, who said it was just a calendar invite that they needed to meet about future funding. That was it. Meeting about future funding. So that's the event. That's the trigger. That is the circumstance. So for you, as you're thinking about this, I want you to think about an email maybe that you received that you felt your chest tighten, or a conversation where you felt maybe defensive, a moment where you said yes to a request that you later wish you had said no and felt like, I can't believe they even asked me. You're kind of having that conversation. So just identify that. And what I want you to think about is taking that event and naming it first as a fact. So for me, I'm going to back off of, oh my God, I just received this calendar invite where they're going to talk about funding cuts. I don't know that that's true. That's a story I'm making up based on listening to the news and conversations and fear and all those other things. So I'm going to back up off of that and identify the event. So the event is I received a calendar invite. It is titled Future Funding with a question mark. I just want to note the question mark. So for you, I want you to do that. Gently kind of walk away, walk backward, or kind of fly above the event and see if you can just name it as a fact. So-and-so said they wanted to talk to me. They requested time to talk to me. So-and-so asked me to be a part of this committee. Whatever it is, right? Think of whatever that thing is that made you feel tight, tense, anxious, maybe frustrated, maybe even angry, right? Just like identify that event. Now I want you to think about the thought. So metacognition, think about your thinking. What story did your brain tell you in that moment? Not the polite version, but the real one, not the email version that you read through, but the real one. What was happening in your head? It might sound something like, I'm going to disappoint them. They don't respect me. They don't ever freaking listen to me or what it is I have to say. They do this to me every time. I have to fix everything. No judging here, no correcting. Just notice the real inside voice of you coming out when that thing happens, when that event occurs. So for me, with that calendar invite, I'm like, oh, here we go. The funding is cut. We're not going to be able to move forward. What are we going to do? And for me, there's like a whole line of thoughts then, right? We're going to have to do blah, 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 blah. So identify that. If you're following along on the PDF, you're going to write that down. So we wrote down the event, fact-based. Everybody agrees this is what happened. Now the thought is, they don't respect me. They never listen to me. They've cut my funding and I don't deserve this. They don't even know what a good job we're doing, whatever, right? So you're going to write that down under thought. Next is emotion. So when I think the thought, oh, they're going to cut my funding, I have some feelings about that. I got some stuff going on in me. I feel angry. I feel frustrated. I feel like we're not going to be able to do this amazing work. That's a thought. I'm thinking we're not going to be able to do this amazing work, and people are going to suffer because they're not going to have these extra tools and support systems in their life. So for you, what is the emotion? And if we can narrow it down to one or two, that's kind of helpful so that we don't get stuck in kind of spiraling here. So maybe it's tightness. Maybe it's a physical sensation. Maybe there's a heat that comes over you or a ringing in your ear or an emotion of anxiety or a pit in your stomach or sadness or grief or urgency. Like, I need to do this right now. It can't wait. This matters, naming this matters because emotions are not abstract. They're physical signals that are preparing us for action. Emotions move us to action, even if that is inaction, even if it's paralysis or overanalysis or stonewalling, right? Emotion moves us to action. So if we don't know what the emotion is, then we're moving to an action that might be out of alignment with what we want. So we're writing down emotion. And then finally, we get to the B of behavior. And sometimes people call the TEB cycle TEA for action. I'm going to call it B for behavior. So when I feel that, what do I do? So in this case, what I did, so I got the calendar invite. I had some thoughts about that, about what that was going to mean. I felt really frustrated. And what I did was went to a business colleague of mine and just pretty much bitched and complained about the state of politics and state funding and wrapped it all around with like, everything's going to shit. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to get served. Like, really just kind of went into this toxic spiraling conversation. So for you, what did you do next? What did you feel pulled to do? So maybe you didn't act on it because you couldn't in the moment, but what did you feel pulled to do? Like, if there were no consequences, right? What would you have wanted to do? Avoid, over explain, over function, just get so busy people pleasing? Do you shut down, push harder? What is that thing? What is the behavior? And then here's the reframe I want you to sit with. That behavior was likely an attempt to get relief. So we can stop judging ourselves for having the urge to do that. That behavior, me going and venting to a colleague, not coaching, not considering, not curiosity. I just went and had a full-on bitch session. That was to get some relief. It was to let it out, right? That behavior was likely an attempt to get relief. It's not a failure. It's not a weakness. It's relief. Now, that relief is temporary because now I've got some repair to do. I just brought this person down who I went and talked to. I'm probably spreading some lies because everything I was saying was not truth. They were my feelings and emotions. And so I've got work to do after that relief. And that's not how I'd like to be in the future. I'd like to go and ask somebody, could you coach me through this? Because boy, I'm really getting looped in some stories here, right? So I want that relief, but I want to do it in a way that aligns with my values and who I want to be. So then if you're looking at the PDF, we've got one more line on there, and that's the outcome. So what was the outcome of that for me? The outcome for me after that behavior was that guess what? I didn't feel better. I had now amplified all of this. I sunk lower into stress and scarcity, and I walked away feeling less hopeful and less resilient. So that's my TEB cycle when I think about the whole thing, from event to the thoughts, to the emotion, to the behavior, to the outcome. That was my mindless TEB. I literally did it without thinking my way through it. Now, here's the second and transformative part of TEB. So that self-awareness that we just created around our mindless TEBs, life-changing, slowing down. Wow, look at this. Look at who I am. Look at how I function. Look at my survival techniques. Look at how much of my challenging outcomes I create on my own. That is important step number one. Now we move to important step number two, which is, how do I use this pause to create outcomes that are more in alignment with who I want to be? We don't usually have a choice over that first thought, right? So the event happens and we have a first thought. We don't usually have a total control over ourselves there. But if we can catch that thought, now we've got control. Now we've got something to work with here. We can learn to notice these things before the wave of emotion, action, behavior all starts to take over, right? So we're going to bring awareness into this. Choice lives in that moment of awareness. When you can say something like, oh, this is the story my brain is telling. I have wrapped that sentence into my parenting because I run some serious TEB cycles in my parenting of my youngest. And I can now catch myself. Oh, here's the story I'm telling myself. Isn't that interesting? Is what I try to follow it up with. Or, oh, this is the feeling moving through me. Oh, this is anger or anxiety or frustration or joy or, whatever that is. Oh, this is what this feels like when it's running through me. So now I'm going to now I've trained myself to recognize it in my body. And now I can bring my awareness into that TEB cycle through emotion, right? So again, if you think about, I'm visualizing this, we've got the event happens, and then we have the thought, the emotion, the behavior, and the outcome of that. I might catch myself, that self-awareness might come through when I catch the thought. Oh, that's interesting. Listen to that story I'm telling myself. I might catch myself in the emotion. Oh, this is that feeling of anxiety and dread moving through my body. Or I might catch myself in behavior. Oh, I'm talking toxic again. I'm stuck in this toxic conversation with this person again. Look at what I'm doing. Isn't that interesting? What else could I do here? Right? So we could bring our awareness to any portion of that TEB.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Ready to level up how you lead at work and at home? Empower Coaching and Training brings brain-based coaching, mindfulness tools, and real-world strategies you can share with those you serve and live with. Get started now. Visit us at yesempower.com.
Cycle. That naming alone starts to shift the nervous system, and it starts to wake up that prefrontal cortex, Dr. PFC, and go, oh, might we wish to do something a little different here? You don't need to fix the thought. You don't need to calm the emotion immediately. This isn't necessarily about like, oh, I feel bad, I'd like to feel better. This is just like, let's wake up to this process. We just need to see the pattern. And for many of us, this can be maybe, Q1 goals, quarter one goals of 2026. I'm just going to work on bringing awareness through journaling, through working with a coach, through self-talk, through self-coaching, whatever it is. The next step in this is to create a mindful TEB, is to walk through, what would I like to change here? And we can't go back, right? I can't go back to receiving that email in that moment, but we all know there's going to be 77 more emails that throw me into some sort of thought, some sort of storytelling, within the next month or two. So I can go back and practice this so that I'm creating new brain pathways to respond differently, to create a more mindful TEB for myself. So again, if you're looking at the PDF, we've got one column that is, let's just bring awareness to our mindless TEB. And now let's work through creating a mindful TEB. So in this example that I've been using, the outcome that I would like to have the next time this happens is that I engage in a self-coaching conversation. I guess that would be more like a monologue, but it is kind of a conversation, a self-coaching conversation before I open my mouth or talk to anybody else. Because I know if I just go right through there, my mindless TEB, I'm going to walk right over to that colleague and I'm going to blah, 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 right, spin out. And I don't want to do that anymore. It's not good for her. It's not good for me. So I'm going to start with the outcome. What's the outcome? The outcome is that I would like to practice self-coaching when these things happen. So now for me, so I'm starting at the bottom of that column. This is the outcome that I want. And you can play with this in any way that makes sense for your brain, but that's what's helpful for me. So if that's what I want to do, and my current behavior, I'm working from the bottom up, my current behavior is that I'm going and engaging in a bitch session with my colleague. Well, that's not going to lead me to that new outcome. So I need to do something different. So I think what I might do, what I'm going to practice doing, is really engaging my breathing mindfulness skills. I'm going to activate my parasympathetic nervous system. So I'm going to take some deep breaths And I'm going, because I know how I work, I'm going to walk. I'm going to walk and I'm going to talk to myself, and I'm going to get that outcome of self-coaching first. So that's the behavior. The behavior is I'm going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to go for a walk. Now, remember I'm bumping up to the top of that column now. The event didn't change. The event is I got this calendar invite with future funding ? I could play with the thought if I could catch it, or I might just go, for right now, for me learning how to create a mindful TEB, I might go, okay, the thought's there, Greg, we're screwed, blah, 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 the politics, blah, blah, blah. The stress is coming. I feel it because I've played with this now of what does this feel like in my body? What happens for me? I roll my eyes. I kind of sink back in my chair. It feels a sense of hopelessness. And what that feels like for me is just kind of a whole sinking in my body. So when that happens, I'm going to breathe. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to go for a walk. And on that walk, the outcome for me is that I'm going to be curious and I'm going to coach myself. The thought doesn't necessarily change in that particular mindful TEB cycle. I could play with that if I wanted to. I could play with, when these emails come and I notice that hopelessness rise, I'm going to actually pause there and go back up and say, what else might be true? That's a question I love to ask myself. So I hear myself saying, there's all the funding's going to dry up. Nobody's going to get services. What else might be true? Maybe they found some extra funding. Maybe they just need to move it over in the spreadsheet and change it around. Or maybe it's, how else could we supplement and prepare together and plan together? I could play with thinking a new thought when that comes in. Not denial, not ostrich head in sand, not make-believe, but I'm telling myself a story that all the funding's gone and we're screwed. That's just a story. I don't have any proof of that personally. So I could also tell myself a story that we're going to get together and we're going to brainstorm. And if I think that thought, well, then my emotion actually, for me, just as I said that, it's like energizing. I love creating. I love thinking about new ways to do things. I love change. And so it felt kind of energizing. Fascinating, right? If we can just play with these a little bit, and we can play with these more than just a little bit, but a lot of bit. This is really such a great tool. I encourage you to print out this PDF and walk through this. Practice it. One thing that you can try this week, the next time you feel activated, pause and ask yourself, what thought just showed up? Practice that metacognition. What emotion is present in my body right now? What is this emotion inviting me to do? Then take one long, deep breath, long exhale. That breath is not passive. It's a neurological interruption. And sometimes that's enough to choose the action or behavior that will guide the outcomes differently because we've interrupted these patterns. If you're a coach listening to this, here is just a little side note for you. TEB is not about helping clients just quote unquote think positively. I mentioned this early, but I want to underscore it as an advocate or a partner in a coaching conversation. We are not just trying to say, well, you don't have to feel bad about this. We could feel good about this because look at these other things, right? TEB is about, and really all of coaching is about helping our coachees see their patterns that support them and patterns that lead to frustration or demise. When clients can show up and name their own thoughts and emotions and behaviors, we're changing neurological byproducts. They are changing neurological byproducts. It's not something we have to push or something we have to convince. What we're doing is helping people see themselves in a mirror. Oh, isn't that interesting? Look at the story I tell myself when this thing comes up. This is such a wonderful coaching tool. I've used it for years and have had so many ahas from people and I had a gargantuan aha when I first started using this tool when it came into my life, and it utterly changed some daily frustration areas in my life. So your job as a coach isn't to reframe it so it's all palatable and feels great. It's to illuminate, to elongate, to press pause and investigate. What was the story that you were telling yourself there? And when you told yourself that story, what was the emotion and where did you feel that in your body? And what did that emotion lead you or encourage you to do? That's coaching somebody in the TEB cycle. And how did that impact the outcomes? And if you wanted a different outcome, what would that be? Right? And then we back up into a mindful TEB. TEB reminds us of something deeply human, that we are not our reactions. These are not permanent processes of who we are. We can pause these. We get to recreate who we are. We get to be curious about the stories, thinking about the stories and our thoughts. We also, in this process of TEB, can see, oh, this isn't my story. I'm telling the fear that I experienced as a child, or that I witnessed in my caregivers or in a previous relationship. I can actually let that story go. With practice, noticing becomes choice. Choice becomes alignment, and alignment becomes the way that we live and lead and relate, because it's new brain pathways. So it's not just within work or within this relationship. It's that I have changed my brain processes and I realize where all of these places I have choice in the way that I live, the way that I lead, and the way that I relate. As always, my friends, be gentle with yourself as you practice this. Notice, be curious. Work with a great coach if you are really leaning into this practice. Your brain is not the enemy. It does not need to be judged or shamed. We need to be empathetic and have self-compassion and be curious. The TEB cycle is such an incredible learning opportunity. Thank you for tuning in today, folks. Stay tuned for next week's episode of Rewired, where I have the opportunity to interview yet another amazing colleague at Empower and part of our senior faculty crew at our Empower Coach Training Academy, Nanor. And we're going to talk specifically about coaching filters, which doesn't have to be used just by coaches. This can be a really great tool for leaders, for partners, for parents, just learning how to listen through the lens of a coach. Very different than if I'm listening through the lens of a consultant, or if I'm listening through the lens of what is broken so that I can fix it. It's an amazing tool that we can develop in ourselves, and I'm excited for the conversation. So be sure to join us next week. Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Rewired, where neuroscience meets real life change. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I'd be so grateful if you take a moment to leave a 5-star review. Your feedback helps people discover the tools, insights, and inspirations they need to create lasting change. While you're leaving that 5-star review, please also subscribe and share an episode with a friend. Remember, the way you think shapes the way you live. Every intentional thought, every mindful choice rewires your brain and your life. So go live intentionally, live thoughtfully, and never underestimate the power of your own mind to transform your world. Until next time, this is Tiffany with Empower Coaching and Training. Stay curious, stay empowered, and keep rewiring for real change.
Every family has challenges, and every parent deserves support. At Empower Coaching and Training, youth and parenting coach Jasmine Chandler helps parents and young people find clarity, connection, and practical tools that make a difference. Visit yesempower.com to connect with Jasmine and explore our team of incredible coaches today.